We are anonymous. We are a legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. And tonight, we reveal a hidden battlefield inside America itself. A war not fought overseas, but in the heart of Philadelphia's broken streets. Kensington. That name once made the nation bow its head. A neighborhood swallowed by darkness where fentanyl heroin and gunfire ruled the night. For nearly a decade, it was controlled by one of the most violent and organized criminal empires the city had ever seen, the Weymouth Street Drug Trafficking Organization. They ruled like a shadow government, a criminal state within the United States. But in the early hours of October 24th, 2025, that empire collapsed. Federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and Philadelphia police launched a massive joint operation known as Operation Weymouth Block, one of the largest narcotics crackdowns in the city's history. In a single coordinated strike, they took down 33 defendants, stormed stash houses, seized cash weapons and narcotics. Helicopters hovered over the rooftops, armored vehicles blocked intersections, and the streets of Kensington exploded with the sound of war. Doors shattered, agents shouted commands, and by dawn, the criminal machine that ruled those streets for nearly 10 years was gone. This was not just another raid. It was the fall of an empire. Federal prosecutors revealed that the Weymouth DTO was not a street gang. It was a corporation militarized, disciplined, and built to kill. It operated like a business with coded communication, armed security, and 24-hour street coverage. Every corner was taxed. Every sale recorded, every rival eliminated. They moved fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and crack around the clock 7 days a week, while terror ruled the blocks. For years, the 3,100 block of Weymouth Street became one of the most active open-air drug markets in the United States. An entire microeconomy, born from pain, fed by addiction, and protected by bullets. Residents described living there as surviving in a war zone. Gunfire was part of the soundtrack of life. Fentanyl was the air people breathed, and silence was something you could only find after blood was spilled. But everything changed when Operation Weymouth Block began. Authorities called it a blueprint, a new model for urban warfare against the cartels embedded inside American cities. When the command was given, federal teams struck 20 targets simultaneously. Drones captured live footage as agents breached row houses, seized weapons, and dragged suspects out in handcuffs. Inside, they found assault rifles, pistols, thousands of rounds of ammunition, stacks of cash, and kilos of narcotics hidden in walls and furniture. Some suspects tried to destroy phones and SIM cards, but digital forensics teams recovered everything on site, exposing encrypted chats and coded ledgers that mapped the network from Philadelphia to Puerto Rico and the Gulf Coast. Money trails led to shell companies, wire transfers, and offshore accounts. The data proved what agents had long suspected. Kensington's corners were just the last link in an international supply chain. The FBI called it a model for the modern cartel, not a gang, a business empire built on death. According to the indictment, the organization was controlled by José Antonio Morales Neas, known on the streets as Flaco. Operating between Puerto Rico and Philadelphia, Morales approved all street activity in exchange for protection fees and rent. His lieutenants managed shifts, collected payments, and ordered hits. Below them were the runners, enforcers, and lookouts, soldiers trained to maintain control through fear and violence. Anyone who talked to police disappeared. Investigators said the hierarchy looked more like a military chain of command than a gang. Orders came from the top. Discipline was absolute. Failure was punished. The DTO even maintained its own security payroll and internal rules. Lookouts carried radios and encrypted phones. Vacant homes became stash houses. Every batch of drugs carried a Weymouth logo, a brand of death stamped into every brick of poison. Over 9 years, the organization became a shadow government. It ruled with its own code, its own taxes, and its own justice system. When the raids began, Precision was everything. 20 warrants were executed at once. Helicopters circled overhead. Armored trucks rolled through the narrow streets. By sunrise, 24 suspects were in custody, 8 already jailed on related charges and 1 still at large. Every major player in the organization had been neutralized. "This isn't a bust," one agent said. "This is an extraction of a criminal regime." But what stunned investigators most was what came after. Files, ledgers, and digital evidence revealed direct ties to suppliers in Puerto Rico and beyond. Federal analysts traced millions of dollars through dummy corporations. Phones seized from Kensington matched communication patterns found in other U.S. cities, Baltimore, Chicago, Atlanta, proving a national network connected through encrypted finance and drugs. Homeland Security confirmed that the same supply routes fed multiple cities. This wasn't an isolated case. It was a chain reaction, an epidemic of power. In Washington, officials hailed Operation Weymouth Block as proof that interagency coordination works when local intelligence meets federal firepower. For 3 years, undercover operations, wiretaps, and surveillance drones built the case, piece by piece. The Project Safe Neighborhoods initiative had allowed the FBI, DEA, and local police to share data in real time, identify high-value targets, and map out leadership structures before moving in. It was patience. It was precision. It was warfare. For the people of Kensington, it was liberation. Residents who had lived under the shadow of open-air drug markets for nearly a decade watched as the armored vehicles rolled in and cleared the corners. Parents stood on porches holding their children, watching federal agents carry out evidence from buildings that had been poison factories for years. For the first time in so long, they said they could hear silence, not gunshots. Cleanup teams began sealing abandoned houses, removing trash, and clearing graffiti. Community outreach groups started treatment programs and housing efforts for those displaced by the shutdown. The wounds were deep, but healing had begun. The government admitted that enforcement alone would not fix everything, but without removing the armed traffickers, there was no future. "You can't rebuild while death still runs the block," one U.S. attorney said. Now the community can finally breathe. Federal agents established a permanent command post in Kensington to prevent resurgence. They vowed the era of open-air empires was over. But even as victory was declared, they warned the war is not done. Fentanyl continues to evolve. New methods, new chemicals, new networks emerge every month. For every cartel dismantled, another waits in the dark. That is why they said this operation is not an ending. It's a beginning, a framework for relentless intelligence-based enforcement. For the first time, the federal government began treating inner city cartel zones as national security threats. The same methods once used overseas were now deployed in American neighborhoods, precision intelligence coordination. Because the battlefield has changed. The enemy no longer carries flags. It hides in basements, in shipping manifests, in data trails across encrypted networks. And the war against it is fought one neighborhood at a time. Anonymous sees this pattern clearly. We've watched how the cartels infiltrate everything, not just the streets, but the systems. They exploit weakness, poverty, corruption. They buy silence with fear and power with cash. They don't need armies when they already control the minds of men. When law enforcement hesitates, they advance. When justice blinks, they rule. That is why we speak. We are not the government. We are not a party. We are the voice that exposes what others hide. Kensington's fall is not just a story about one neighborhood. It is a mirror held up to a nation drowning in its own contradictions. You cannot declare a war on drugs while ignoring the hunger that fuels it. You cannot fight cartels abroad while they thrive within your own borders. And you cannot save a country that refuses to see the truth standing in front of it. From Texas to Chicago, from Miami to Seattle, similar operations are now underway. Operation Ironwave, Operation Clean America, Operation Convergence. Different names, same mission. to cut the arteries of death that feed on addiction and despair. But here is the truth few will say out loud. Cartels don't fear bullets. They fear exposure. They fear light. They fear the moment their secret alliances are revealed, when the world sees that their corruption runs deep into the very institutions sworn to fight them. That is why we continue. We are anonymous. We see, we know, and we speak. Tonight you've heard the story of a war that most will never acknowledge. A war fought not with tanks, but with data drones and determination. The raid on Kensington wasn't just an operation. It was a statement, a promise that the people who live in the dark corners of this nation are not forgotten. But the fight is far from over. For every empire brought down, another begins to rise. And so long as greed exists, so long as the powerful profit from suffering, this war will never truly end. That is why we exist, to remind the world that the line between crime and power has never been thinner, to reveal that the real battle is not between good and evil, but between truth and silence. If you are listening to this, remember, the war against darkness doesn't end with an arrest. It begins with awareness, with truth, with courage,